Americans for Prosperity North Dakota proudly supported important policy improvements that broke barriers for all North Dakotans this legislative session. From tackling unnecessary and burdensome occupational licensing standards to fighting for tax relief, AFP is proud to have played a part in improving the lives of North Dakotans this year. Join AFP today by visiting www.afpnd.org. This advertisement was paid for by Americans for Prosperity. Welcome to the Plain Talk Podcast. I'm Rob Port. Later in the show, Congressman Kelly Armstrong takes questions talking about the 4th of July, talking about, obviously, the situation at the border, the upcoming Mueller testimony before Congress. Stay tuned for all of that. But before we get there, let's talk about the border situation for a moment. There is some news. It didn't get a lot of attention, but I thought it was interesting. I don't know that it got a lot of it. It got some reporting, but it didn't really get a lot of attention because of, especially given how focused everybody is on what's going on down at the southern border. What I'm talking about are questions made by the new Salvadoran president. Now, I'm going to butcher his name. He's the president of El Salvador. His first name is Nayib Bukele. Nayibbukele. I apologize if I'm absolutely... pronunciation of names is not my strong suit, so I apologize for that. He's the newly elected president of El Salvador. And his comments are important, especially in the context of... I'm sure most of you have seen the headlines and the horrible, horrible pictures of the father and daughter who drowned in the Rio Grande River while trying to cross the southern border. The president had an interesting take, and he told it to the BBC. And essentially what he says is that the tragedy could have been avoided if conditions in El Salvador were better. This is what he said specifically. This is his quote. People don't flee their homes because they want to. People flee their homes because they feel they have to. Why? Because they don't have a job. Because they are being threatened by gangs. Because they don't have basic things like water, education, and health. He continues, we can blame any other country, but what about our blame? What country did they flee? Did they flee the United States? They fled El Salvador. They fled our country. It is our fault. I think that's such an interesting perspective, and it's not one we often hear because obviously we being Americans look at the situation with illegal immigration and asylum seekers and everything else. We look at it from an American perspective, and of course, the way we look at it is, why won't we let these people in, right? Or should we let them in? That's the debate that Americans have. What often goes missing in that debate is what's going on in the places where these people are coming from. Why do so many of them want to knock down our door to get in? I know it's a horrible situation, and there's a lot of pain and suffering that goes into it. So I don't want to make it sound like it's a glad situation. But from the Americans' perspective, especially as we come up on 4th of July, it's kind of an indication that this is still a pretty darn good place to be. For a lot of the world, this is still very much the land of opportunity. And, people lining up to get into our country, well, it's a good problem to have. But the other perspective is, what can we do maybe to make it so that people don't need to come here. I don't want to say, because I don't want to make people not want to come to America, right? I mean, I don't want our place, our country, our nation, our society to become a place that people don't want to come. But what can we do to make it so that they don't feel like they have to? What do we do so it's not like a desperate choice that they have to make, where they put themselves at risk to drug traffickers, human traffickers. They engage in risky behavior trying to get across our borders, breaking our laws. What is going on? What could we do to alleviate some of that? I think the president of El Salvador's got the right idea, because he's saying, what can we do here in El Salvador to make this a better place so that people don't feel like they have to flee? I think you can make that same argument about Mexico. I think you can make that same argument about a lot of the Central and Southern American, South American nations, communities, where these people are coming from. What can we do to make these places better? And in fact, what is our country doing to help? Now, I realize a lot of my fellow conservatives don't like the idea of foreign aid and intervention in the business of other nations. Nation building is certainly out of favor post-Iraq and Afghanistan. So I realize that what I'm saying is not that popular, but yet it's a simple reality. These people are fleeing something. And what they're fleeing are awful conditions in the places they are. In America's capacity, even if we wanted to, even if the political will existed to take it on, our capacity to really change things in a place like El Salvador is limited. We could provide aid and we could promote the sort of things that has lifted America into being the place that people want to come, which would be free market capitalism, an open democratic political process, strong courts, strong law enforcement, not abusive law enforcement, but law enforcement that exists to enforce laws that are just, to protect the marketplace so that law-abiding commerce can thrive. Those are the sort of things that can make a place like El Salvador better. But while America can promote those things in El Salvador, it's not going to happen until Salvadorans choose it for themselves, until the people there, elect the leaders or put in place the leaders and enforce the laws that make that sort of thing possible. But again, it's so much of the politics here in America at the southern border is blaming people for the crisis. And you're going to hear Congressman Armstrong in a few moments talk that he's happy that Democrats are finally recognizing that there is, in fact, a crisis at the southern border. Remember, not so long ago, they were dismissing it. They were calling it a manufactured crisis, or they were claiming that there was no crisis at all. No, there's a real crisis, and that crisis is beginning in other countries around the world where things are so terrible that people feel like they have to flee them. Again, it gives me a deep sense of happiness that America is, how did Ronald Reagan put it, the shining city on a hill. And I think we can be that for a lot of them that want to come here legally, but we need to be able to control it. We need to have some control over it. It can't just be somebody is fleeing their country and is going to flee into our country and we're not going to have any control over it. It can't be that way for a lot of reasons, having to do with public health, having to do with national security. We need some level of control over it. What's amazing is how polarized we've become on this, because on one hand, you have Trump, and I don't think President Trump specifically feels this way, but a lot of Trump supporters feel this way. There's, build the wall, keep them all out. They don't want to let any of them in. Meanwhile, on the other side, it's not just a faction of the Democratic Party. It is literally their 2020 presidential candidates. Several of them want to do away with the law that makes it illegal to cross the southern border in the first place. They just want all immigration across the border to be legal. They're literally just talking about an open border. If they want to come in, let them in. Those are the extremes, and I don't know how we reconcile those other than to just say that I think we need, and I've been saying this for a long time, I've long felt that what we need is a tall fence, a tall wall at the border, but a wide gate. But even beyond that, because I've said that in the past, but even beyond that position, I think we also need to be looking, what can we do to help El Salvador be a better place? What can we do to help Guatemala or Honduras or Mexico, for that matter, be a better place to live? So that the people who are living there don't decide that they need to make a desperate attempt to come to our country. What can we do about those things? It would be very gratifying to me if the immigration debate included that facet more prominently. My conversation with Congressman Kelly Armstrong, coming up next. This episode of the Plain Talk Podcast is brought to you by Energy of North Dakota. Oil and natural gas from North Dakota strengthens all of America. And through our abundance of talents, innovations, and technologies, energy responsibly produced here translates to worldwide economic stability. With producers and our communities working together, we're securing a sustainable future that generation after generation can build on. It's all happening right now with Energy of North Dakota. Learn more at energyofnorthdakota.com. Congressman Kelly Armstrong joins me now, and we're recording this earlier in the week, but this will actually go out on 4th of July Eve. Is that a thing, Kelly? 4th of July Eve?
Well, I hope it is, because I'll be at the Minot Air Show the night before the air show, meeting the pilots and saying hi to everybody. So we have a pretty good 4th of July evening plan.
Well, you'll see me out there with my kids in my summer dad outfit, which is cargo shorts and a t-shirt. So, I'll probably see you out there somewhere at the Minot Air Show.
Lots of pockets in those cargo shorts.
Lots of pockets. Well, you got it, because that's essentially the dad's job, right? When you're on a family outing like that, is the dad is the pack mule. You know, every little thing the kids don't want to carry has got to go in one of dad's pockets.
Style is secondary.
Style is secondary. Well, it's the dad style. I think people should run down the dad style. The dad style is a very cool style. I've been dressing like a dad since high school, I think. 4th of July holiday. What do you, I've been writing my Sunday column, and I always get a little philosophical around the 4th of July, mostly because, obviously, you're thinking about the Bill of Rights. We spend all this crazy time fighting each other about policy and elections and everything else. And the 4th of July is really just sort of what it's all supposed to be about. And I've been writing, it seems like patriotism, at least for a certain faction of Americans, isn't fashionable anymore. And as a matter of fact, I was just reading about a survey from the National Association of Retailers, which said that the number of Americans who say that they're celebrating 4th of July is in decline. And I wanted to ask you, why do you think that is? Why do you think there are so many people out there who are just sort of, I look at the people who talk about America, and they have that little slur going on, and you have politicians out there saying, America was never great. And I realize some of that's just kind of a jab back at President Trump's slogan, but I think there's people out there who really don't think our country is all that great. And I think in the past that was a very small slice of people on the margins of American society, but I think it is growing. Do you feel that way too? And why do you think it's happening?
Well, and then, you got things like Nike pulling American flag shoes because Colin Kaepernick doesn't like them. And there's different issues too, but I think a couple things. One, I think, church attendance is down, club membership is down, whether it's the Elks, the Knights of Columbus, the American Legion. Summers are spent, at least around here, with a lot of people chasing their kids around everywhere, whether it's soccer or baseball or all of that. Two, I think, we haven't had, since the Berlin Wall fell, when I was in the 7th grade, we've had, obviously, war on terror and those types of issues, but we haven't had since September 11th any of those really big things that bring our country together. And, we do those things really well, and they're usually born out of tragedy. So it's fantastic that we haven't had them. But at the same time, with social media and the way news is portrayed right now, everything is so negative all the time, and that really just shouldn't be the case.
Do you think it's a product of taking? I agree with you, and I think particularly of my generation. I was born. I would have been too young to serve in the first Gulf War. I was about the right age to serve in this, the second Gulf War, the Iraq-Afghanistan operations. I didn't serve in the military, but that was sort of my generation's war. But it really, we've had it on the whole. Realizing that nothing is ever perfect, but we've had it very good for a long time. Yes, we had 9/11 and we had, the Great Recession, and we've had some economic hardships or what have you. But for the most part, my generation, your generation, you're not that much older than me, we've had it good. We've really been living in sort of Pax Americana. We haven't had that World War II moment or that Vietnam moment. We had 9/11, but it's not really on the same scale. And even the war we went to, nobody was getting drafted. It was voluntary. I remember at one point, seeing some graffiti that American soldiers had put up somewhere in like Iraq, I think it was, that said America's not at war, America's at the shopping mall, and I think that's true. I mean, it wasn't like we were doing rationing or anything so that we could have the Iraq War. I mean, yes, there was very much a big toll and cost. A lot of people lost their lives, and it cost us a lot of money, but it didn't really touch most Americans all that directly. Do you think we're just taking it for granted?
Well, yes, and the other thing about 9/11 and the war on terror that was different is it was a whole different thing, right? We weren't at war with a country. We were at war with a group of people who we didn't go big scale. We had to go small scale. It was an intelligence gathering thing. It was a strike force thing. And we have shown ourselves very capable at it. But also at the same time, you have this I still contend it's a very small minority, but they're very loud, who hate the military. They hate all law enforcement. They hate the things that used to bring people together with pride, and they get a disproportionate amount of traffic on those ideas, which I think just most people don't feel those ideas, but at the same time, when it's out there all the time, it tends to, it permeates through some of it. You know what I mean?
I do. We also don't. Our culture is so fractured now too. In some ways, it's a good thing. I mean, it's a great thing that you have so many more choices for entertainment, right? I mean, we're living in a golden age of television and movies. I mean, there's Americans are a thoroughly entertained people. We have lots and lots of options, but we don't have. I mean, it used to be if there was just 3 television channels, like everybody was watching Ed Sullivan and everybody was talking about what was on Ed Sullivan the night before, right? Because it was just, I felt like that because culture was more monolithic, we talked to each other more. And now because we can all kind of go down our own little rabbit holes, we're not doing it as much.
Well, and people used to talk, with their voices. Now everybody talks with their thumbs all the time. Yeah.
Well, as somebody who makes their living off being a jerk on the internet, I resent that comment. So, but yeah, I don't know. It's a hard thing. So you're celebrating the 4th of July at an air show. Do you feel like that's? I don't know what I'm even trying to say. And I'm now recording this podcast in the middle of writing my Sunday column about this. So I'm still very much formulating my ideas. I want us to get past the politics of the moment and embrace what America aspires to. Because yes, I mean, when Thomas Jefferson wrote that all men were created equal, he owned slaves at the time. I mean, we've never been perfect at this, but we've always aspired to more. I think that's what makes us great. Do you agree?
I agree, and there's 2 things. One, if people want to see how to celebrate 4th of July, they should come to North Dakota, because whether it's West Fargo, whether it's Mandan, whether it's Rough Rider Days that was a day earlier, whether it's an air show in Minot, or whether it's every small town from one end of the state to the other, I think we do 4th of July.
Are great. Yeah,
but they're good, and they're fun, and people do put that stuff aside. But no, and I agree, and I think people also forget how young this democratic republic that is the United States, this great social experiment that is our country, is in the history of the world. And that regardless, warts and all, you're right, we're not perfect, but we're the only country that's ever, I think Charles Krauthammer said this, we're the only country that's ever been formed on an idea. And that idea, and the idea is liberty, and that is a fantastic goal to aspire to, and we should do it every day.
Let's talk about some current events. A congressional delegation went down to the border to visit some of the facilities there. All sorts of stuff coming out of that. What are your thoughts? First of all, top level, what are you seeing?
Well, top level is I think that there was probably a whole lot of preconceived notions baked in to go down there. But I think we should all just be happy that Democrats are finally acknowledging that there is a crisis on our border, because it wasn't that long ago that none of them actually admitted that that was the case. And to put this in the simplest perspective for everybody understanding what the drain on the resources are, over our history, it was typically one adult with one out of 10 adults had a child with them when they came to the border. Now it's about 50%. And when that happens, all of the rules, all the processes, everything changes, and they're overwhelmed. It's a humanitarian crisis. Our laws don't work for what we're dealing with. We saw this in North Dakota with the DAPL protests. That is obviously not an apples-to-apples comparison in any way, shape, or form. But our laws and our asylum laws and our immigration laws are quite frankly inadequate to deal with the surge we're seeing there, particularly with the number of kids. So I'm glad we passed the bill. I'm glad the moderate Democrats in the U.S. House won the day last week, because it's important to get this money down there and it's important to get some of this aid to these people.
The hard part is that you're right. When they go down there, there's preconceived notions. I mean, the politicians just kind of see what they want to see. I'm thinking of your friend, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is suggesting that she was attacked. I don't know if it's verbally or physically. I don't know, but she was posting on social media that she was attacked during her tour of the border facility. I mean, it's like they go down there and it's all performance theater, right? They're just supposed to be. They're not going down there to learn. They're not going down there to see, with their own eye, which you would think was the purpose of this trip. It's like they just went down there so that they could, emote and further their talking points for what they already decided they were going to see. I look at that and I'm just frustrated.
Yes, I'm glad they went. I hope they learned something. I hope they can bring it back. But I do find it a little interesting that, the leadership of the Republican side has been, we've had numerous codels down there. I've been to the northern border in North Dakota, talked to our guys who have spent way more time down on the southern border than most people understand. I just find it a little interesting that they went after they voted against the humanitarian aid bill. And call me skeptical, but I'm not entirely sure this was a fact-finding mission.
Let's President Trump meeting with the dictator of North Korea, Kim Jong-un. Good idea, bad idea? What'd you think?
I think it's a good idea. I've said this about particularly this brand of diplomacy with President Trump since it started. We have decades-long attempts to deal with them. And I think this is one of the things that, gets a little frustrating sometimes. Sometimes we have the collective, we as Americans have the collective attention span of a fruit fly. It wasn't that long ago where we were worried about North Korea shooting rockets into American airspace. And that, love them or hate them, don't like this or like this, it seems that at least at this point in time, North Korea is less of a threat than they've been at any point in time in the last 3 decades.
Well, firing missiles not just into our airspace, possibly reaching American ground, like Alaska, for instance, but also our allies, like South Korea, like Japan in that region. We don't want to see anybody get nuked. That would be terrible. President Trump went there. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, the big problem with North Korea is, that we always forget is we talk about nuclear capabilities and whatever, but if we ever end up in serious conflict with them, traditional weapons alone, we better be willing. The damage they could inflict on Seoul within the first hour of any conflict is millions of lives lost. So, this is a serious issue even before you get into the nuclear part of the conversation.
Yeah. Do you, it was a last minute thing, President Trump going there. Do you think that that's part of his style? I honestly liked it. And I'm somebody who sometimes I don't like President Trump's style. I think sometimes he gets in his own way with some of the things he says and the tweeting and all that stuff that we've talked about over time. But sometimes his willingness to just cut through things and just do something, right? Sometimes I think it's just nice to see a politician who says, you know what, I'm just going to do something. So the president's like, well, I'm over here in Japan. Let's just swing by North Korea and meet Kim Jong-un. Normally that sort of thing would take months of preparation and negotiations, and President Trump just did it. I like it. More of that. Let's just do some more of this stuff. And I'm not talking about making rash decisions, but all he did is went there and talked to the guy. More of that, please. That's my feeling.
Yeah. Regardless of this particular issue, I agree with that. I think that when he is like that, that's when he's at his best. And that's when people recognize why, I believe, why they voted for him in the first place, because he's not a politician. I watched it happen when the NDSU Bison came for a photo op at the White House, which was supposed to be, I'm not kidding, Rob, this was supposed to be a 1-minute photo op, and the NDSU Bison were in the White House for 2.5 hours. Now, I can tell you who doesn't like it, his schedulers.
Wow.
But that's, and truly, but everything we've done with these guys hasn't worked for 30 years. And so if trying something different, if it makes us a little safer for a couple days with any kind of chance of long-term resolution, I think it's worth trying.
I think you're right. Last question. Bob Mueller is going to testify before Congress. That's before your committee, right? He's testifying in front of the committee that you're on. Not your committee, but
I refer to it as my committee. Don't tell the other members.
Okay, fair enough. Do you? What are you expecting? I kind of expect a big nothing. It seems like he's reluctantly doing this. He has been unwilling to offer much in the way of comments beyond his report. I feel like it's just going to be a lot of, well, Congressman, if you'll read page 244 of the report. I feel like it's just going to be a bunch of that. Like it's just going to be him reading the report back to the committee. I think it's going to be very anticlimactic.
Yeah, especially considering the pomp and the circumstance that's going to lead up to it. I don't think he's going to leave the four corners of the document either. It's going to be very interesting to see. So here's a little secret that I'll let your podcast viewers on. When we have really smart witnesses on the witness stand, and I think regardless of what you think of Bob Mueller, I think everybody understands that he is a very talented lawyer and a very smart guy. You will see a lot of people giving 5-minute speeches because they're not necessarily comfortable engaging with somebody who can engage back as well.
Well, and it's
which
hard.
I think is unfortunate because we get 5 minutes, which is a terrible way to do these hearings to begin with. There's really no back and forth. There's no colloquy between two sides. Sometimes on smaller hearings there is, but there just won't be on this one. But I mean, there are going to be a whole lot of people that are going to be very cautious about engaging with a guy who, quite frankly, it doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. You get into a back and forth on this stuff. I mean, you better be careful with what questions you're asking him because he understands. I mean, he knows the information as well as anybody. We all know that.
Well, there's also been all this speculation, like, oh, Mueller's trying to tell us this, Mueller's trying to tell us that. Well, when you're talking to Mueller, I mean, he's right there. You better not ask any questions you don't know the answer to.
Well, but that's exactly right? I mean, somebody should ask him, is this what you were trying to say? I mean, I think there'll be a lot of, I think the Democrats will focus a lot on the bar, misrepresent what they say is a misrepresentation of the Mueller report. I think there'll be some Republicans, me included quite possibly, that talk about the genesis of this whole thing and how much biased information was utilized to start this whole investigation. There's a lot of ways you can go. It's just, it'll be interesting to see how he interacts with the committee.
Yeah, it will be for sure. We'll probably get an update on that after the holiday. Kelly, thanks for your time and enjoy the 4th of July.
You too, Rob. I might see you this week.
You might. You just might. Look for the guy, the big fat guy in the cargo shorts carrying around the kids. That'll be me.
I'll be the only guy in a sports coat and a collared shirt because that's what. Well, maybe not at the air show the night before.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Kelly.
All right.
I hope you all have a wonderful 4th of July holiday. I love the 4th of July holiday, and not just because I like fireworks. I like celebrating the idea of America. My print column, my Wednesday print column this week was about that fact. In a lot of ways, celebrating America, American patriotism has fallen out of fashion. I mean, Nike is a company right now that feels safe pulling a Betsy Ross themed sneaker that was created for the 4th of July because Colin Kaepernick says it's racist because the colonial flag, or the flag, I shouldn't call it the colonial flag, an early American flag with stars for the 13 colonies, the one associated with Betsy Ross, was a flag that existed during the time of slavery. Therefore, he thinks that those sneakers are racist. Now, Colin Kaepernick is also a man who unironically wears shirts praising Fidel Castro, who, by the way, put the tens of thousands of Cubans into forced labor camps. So if we're going to, complain about, historical figures that, promote slavery, Fidel Castro is a much more modern one than, Betsy Ross or the flag that she created. So anyway, but it's just interesting that a huge company like Nike feels comfortable today in 2019 basically taking a position that patriotism is somehow something to be ashamed of, that America's history is somehow something to be ashamed of. Now, don't get me wrong, there are ugly chapters in American history, to be sure. The Declaration of Independence states, that all men are created equal and endowed with certain unalienable rights. That is a high-minded philosophy that we created, and to be sure, we have failed often in our aspirations to it. But we've still aspired, and we've still tried, and on the whole, we've gotten better, and I think the world is a better place because America and its ideals exists in it, and that is something worth celebrating. It made me sad. I mentioned this in my column as well. The National Association of Retailers did a survey, and they found that a declining number of Americans are saying that they're going to celebrate the 4th of July holiday. I think that's very much a product of this attitude that the patriotism in America somehow is uncool or it's uncouth, right? Something that inbred rubes get up to, right? When they're not busy being racist, xenophobes. It's unfortunate that's the attitude out there, because America does stand for a lot of great things, and the fact that we have failed at times to achieve those things or even to aspire to them, that we've been imperfect in the past, is no reason not to celebrate the good that we have accomplished, because, trust me, we've accomplished a lot of it. Thanks for listening, as always. If you want more of this podcast, you can follow me on social media. You'll also get my blog posts and my columns. Just search for Rob Port or Say Anything Blog on Facebook or Twitter. Also, if you're listening to this on a platform that allows you to rate or review podcasts, it would please me very much if you would leave a rating or review. Every new one helps other people find the podcast, so that's always a good thing. Also, if you ever have any feedback on the show, just email it to rob@sayanythingblog.com. That includes questions for our weekly guests, Senator Kevin Cramer, Congressman Kelly Armstrong. And once again, thanks for listening. I appreciate it. Happy 4th of July.